The final four teams in the NBA, and they are top seed Boston, 6th seed Indiana, 3rd seed Minnesota, 5 seed Dallas. Somebody even joked on Twitter, a 6th seed made it to the conference finals. It was the wrong one, but a 6th seed did make it to the conference finals in the NBA.
Oh, man. Wasn't there a 6th seed that won it all?
The Rockets.
Houston.
The back in the Hakeem
Rockets.
Olajuwon days.
Yeah.
They eliminated the Suns on their way to doing that.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
that
you
was
for
painful, right?
taking my open wound and just like
geez.
pouring all the salt in it there, Gambo. Yep, that doesn't hurt at all. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I can handle that.
No, it's you look at Indiana beat the Knicks because the Knicks just didn't have any players.
Yes.
They just had there was nobody left, and Brunson got hurt in the game, and he had to leave, and OG Anunoby decided to play, but it wasn't even worth him playing because he left the game right away because he wasn't any good, and Josh Hart was injured, and he tried to play, and he couldn't play, and so the Indiana Pacers find themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals, and a lot of people are shocked at that.
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't be, maybe they should be, but if you just look at the seeds, you realize that this wasn't chalk. So far, these NBA playoffs have not been chalk by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
They have been upsets and teams we weren't expecting and parity, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And maybe that's also part of what should give us hope for the Suns in the future based off of this Final Four as you look at it. And it's different. It's parity. It's a lot of teams with a chance. But this article brought up two things. And I'm going to start with the second one, okay? Because I think that's the one that grabbed your attention the most. Almost all of these teams are over the apron in the tax level.
Fascinated
right?
by this.
The only one that's not is the Dallas Mavericks. Okay. But the Minnesota Timberwolves, their tax tracker, they're in the first apron. Boston's in the second apron. Indiana's higher than Boston. They're in the second apron. There are people who believe that the reason why the Suns can't win a championship, won't win a championship, is that they're spending too much money. They're not that they're spending too much money, but that they're limited by what they can do because they're over this tax apron and they're kind of screwed. Well, here's the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics who are also over the second tax apron and they're not. Here's the Timberwolves who's over the first tax apron and they're not screwed. It's not necessarily you're screwed just because you get into that apron.
Here's the salaries for Minnesota. $49 million next year. This is next year for Karl Anthony Towns. $43 million for Rudy Gobert and $35 million for Anthony Edwards. Edwards goes from $13 million this year to $35 million. Cat goes from 36 to 49, and Rudy goes from 41 to 43. Just those two guys alone, you're going up $35 million in salary on those two guys. One guy goes up 2, another guy goes up 13, that's 15, and then another guy goes up $22 million.
Yeah.
$37 million in salary. Jaden McDaniels also goes from $3 million this year to $22 million next year.
Wow, he goes up that high?
He goes from 3.9 to $22 million. So their payroll this year is 163 with the full roster. Their payroll next year is 175. That doesn't count McLaughlin. That doesn't count Kyle Anderson or Monty Morris or Mike Conley, whose contract expires at $24 million. It doesn't count any of those guys.
So does this mean the Suns are on the right track? Does this mean that the Suns, that we shouldn't worry so much about being a second tax apron team and all the limitations that come with it when we're seeing other teams having success with this?
I'm going to say no. Jaden McDaniels is 23 years old. Anthony Edwards is 22 years old. Karl Anthony Towns is 28. So their younger stars are on the low. Their oldest star, not counting Conley because he's a free agent, is Rudy Gobert at 31. So the Suns go from Booker up, where the Timberwolves go from Rudy Gobert down. So you're talking about a 28-year-old Karl Anthony Towns, a 22-year-old Anthony Edwards, a 24-year-old Naz Reid, who's under contract for the next 2 years. He's 24. You got Alexander Walker under contract next year. He's 25. Jaden McDaniels, 23. You see, I think the difference is age.
Yeah.
I think the difference is age and athleticism.
The difference is that the Phoenix Suns have all their money tied up into older, maybe old or older, depending on your.
They got KD, but we got Jaden McDaniels.
Thanks for throwing that in. Thanks, Mitch, for
Jade
throwing that in.
McDaniels is 23 years old. Their Suns don't have a player like him.
No, and certainly not one that they're paying. I mean, like Devin Booker is entering the prime of his career. Devin Booker is not old by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but the other two guys are.
But I mean, Kevin Durant is, and Bradley Beal's. Just given how his production has kind of declined, you wonder about what his latter years are going to look like.
It is fascinating to see that. What was the other team?
Boston at one.
See, they're a little different.
195. Well, Minnesota's only in the first apron. Boston and Indiana are both in the second apron with the Suns.
Indiana is too.
Yeah, huh? Indiana is too. Boston is too. And so they're finding a way. But again, I would imagine you're going to look at it and say that's a team with their money tied up in younger players, right? That's probably the difference. Most of the money for the Suns is tied up in one player who's getting really old and another player who's not as old, but because he's always hurt, becomes a real trade liability. Very hard to move.
Let's go over the Pacers. DeAndre Ayton is I'm teasing. He wasn't not there. All right, so you look at the Pacers' salary. Pascal Siakam is $37 million this year, but he's not on the contract for next year unless they re-sign that I don't know about. Miles Turner, $19 million next year. T.J. McConnell, $9 million. Benedict Mathurin, $7 million. Tyrese Halliburton, $35 million. Neesmith, $11 million. They don't have any. I'm curious on So Indiana's over the apron right now.
Yeah.
Okay. It's got to be Siakam at $37.8 million.
And then when they lose that, they won't be. Yeah.
Because they're going to go from 141 to 105 based on the numbers that are out. They got Miles Turner, who's 28. They got Tyrese Halliburton, who's 24. Neesmith is 24. So Mathurin's 21. Like, a lot of their key players are still younger guys. Siakam's 30. Maybe they try to keep him. I don't know.
They might, based off of the success that they've had. The other thing, too, is that the article points out is that all four of these teams went outside to bring in help to help them get where they're going. All of them did. Yeah. Boston, Porzingis and Drew Holiday. The Timberwolves, Gobert and Conley. The Pacers, Halliburton and Siakam. The Mavs, crazy enough, they've only got 2 players left from their run to the Western Conference Finals just 2 years ago.
Isn't that similar to the Suns?
Yeah, it's
the similarity that's the similarity.
We're going to talk about that in the next segment a little bit because we're going to talk about the Mavs and them winning that game on Saturday night. And in many ways, everything that went wrong for the Suns went right for the Dallas Mavericks, right? Like, their blueprints are somewhat similar. And we'll talk about this coming up in a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these teams, this idea that you have to be homegrown. No, you don't. Look at these 4 teams that are left in the NBA.
Yeah.
You don't got to be homegrown. Tyrese Halliburton's not a homegrown Indiana Pacer. Drew Holiday's not a homegrown Boston Celtic.
Pascal Siakam put Indiana over the top. Yep. That was huge for them.
Yeah, sure.
We'll talk about the Mavericks in a second.
Yeah.
The Rudy Gobert trade. Hey, they kept receipts on that.
Yes,
they did. The Rudy Gobert trade.
Yes, they did.
So, all of these teams have made moves that have really helped.
Thanks for watching Burns and Gambo. Click to see more from the guys and hit the button in the middle to subscribe so you never miss a video from Arizona sports.